It's so great to welcome back to the program today Lee McIntyre, who's a research fellow at the Center for Philosophy and History of Science at Boston University, also author of the book Post-Truth, which we are linking to today from the YouTube video for this interview. Lee, it's so great to have you back.
Great. Thank you so much for having me back.
So a lot of what is in your book, Post-Truth, relates so significantly to what we've seen in media and heard from the federal government led by Donald Trump about coronavirus over the last several months. We've seen everything from denial to disinformation to cloudy data about what is going on, test results that can't really be relied upon because we're not really testing. So let's sort of, to open the conversation, how does your sort of analysis that you do in the book apply to what we're living through right now?
Well, unfortunately, it applies directly. I wrote the book. The book was published 2 years ago. I had no clue about coronavirus. But at the end of the book, I predicted that we were in for a hard correction from reality if we stayed on the route that we were on. Trump has been running this playbook for a very long time. If you look at the things that he was initially lying about, the size of his inauguration crowd, whether he had whether there were illegal voters and he'd actually won the popular vote. Those are things that are important, but he wasn't held accountable for them. And there, you might say that in a way, that they weren't life and death matters. Well, we're now to a life and death matter. And I think what happened is he got away with those kind of lies. What are they up to now? 15,000 counted through the Washington Post. He got so used to it, and the little boy who cried wolf. And here we are, and we're now getting that hard check from reality, where he's just learned that he can get away with lying and distracting and all the other things. But we're now all undergoing the consequences of that, and we're about to get, within the next 10 days, a very hard check from reality.
One of the things that is sometimes debated now is it that facts don't matter, or is it that it's very easy to get whatever facts you sort of want with the widespread availability of both, liars in government and actual propaganda news and so on? With the coronavirus thing, it doesn't seem that it's that facts don't matter. It's that it's very easy to find a set of facts or supposed facts that say, this isn't really serious. It's sort of like the flu. Keep going to the beach, keep going to concerts, all of this sort of stuff. It's going to pass. It's all under control. So my instinct is, it's not that facts don't matter, is that there's facts available for whoever wants to find somebody asserting one thing or the other thing as is convenient. What's your sense of that?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, if facts didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying so hard to spin the narrative or look for alternative facts. In my book, I define post-truth as the political subordination of reality. So it's not that truth doesn't matter, or that when you say you're in a post-truth era, that's not to say that truth doesn't matter, that nobody cares about truth anymore. It means that we're living in an era in which truth is endangered. And the thing that's endangering it is that post-truth is really a tactic that's used by authoritarians and their wannabes to control the narrative. Because if you can control the narrative and the information flow, maybe you can control the population. And so it's a very dangerous thing that we can read out in many different examples. There are a number of different examples. We're now living through a moment when I think that post-truth is particularly visible, just because so many people are paying attention. So many people are threatened by lies and denial. All of a sudden we're all on the same boat, and we're not just. It's not just that we're getting our information from different sources. We're all seeing the same things happening in our neighborhood.
What are some of the strategies you suggest people adopt to find out the truth and to cut the risk of maybe signal boosting disinformation? I mean, a great example is every couple of days I read or someone writes to me, hey, they're testing chloroquine as a possible coronavirus treatment. And before I say that to my audience, I want to figure out, am I doing the equivalent of spreading anti-vax stuff? or am I reporting on something that's really going on? What's the right process that you recommend people go through to figure out what's real?
It's tough because the minute you report on a lie, you've amplified the lie. And cognitive scientists have shown that people will remember the lie. They won't remember whether it was true. They won't remember the source. They'll just remember that they heard it. And so the thing that's very important to do for anybody in the media is when you're going to report on false information, say the false information is a story because a prominent person said it. I recommend that what people do is follow the advice of the psychologist George Lakoff, who said that what we need is a truth sandwich. You start off by telling the truth, then you report on the lie as a lie, and then you fact check it. You show why maybe the person was motivated to do it and what's wrong with it. So it's very important for folks not to, as you said, amplify false information because that just puts it out there and then it goes and goes.
Where are some of the centers of propagating so-called alternative facts or disinformation outside of politics? In politics, we're so familiar with it, and I
Yeah.
deal with it every day. Coronavirus is exposing that in medicine, and of course, quack medicine, sham medicine. I think we may understand that one. But what are other sort of centers of disinformation?
Well, I look at it this way. Disinformation is created for a purpose. Disinformation is not an accident. So disinformation is created when somebody has a financial interest or a political interest or an ideological interest in getting people to believe something that isn't true. So when you say outside politics, I don't know if you're including Russia in that. Because one thing that I found very interesting for the last few days is if you look at the Twitter handles that are trending, for the last several days, new Twitter handles in American politics start to trend at around 3 o'clock in the morning, which is, amazingly, well, that's wake up time over in Moscow. So they're messing with our politics. They're messing with our Twitter handles, as we knew. Now, examples out saying you also mentioned science denial. I mean, if you think about what are the fossil fuel industries, what is the big tobacco, those sorts of people with financial interests, what do they have to gain by creating disinformation? I mean, I'm sure there are other examples that I could give, but you think of if you think of the political and ideological examples, you think of the economic examples, those are really the big ones these days. But I think that anytime somebody is telling you something that you kind of wonder, does that person have a stake in that being true? It should make you skeptical.
When we are thinking now about what needs to happen from here until whenever we start to see a change in the trends with what's going on with coronavirus, it seems to me that when, for example, Fox and Friends says this is actually a great time to fly, the planes are empty, the airports are empty, this is
Yeah.
fantastic. There is actually a real human risk, particularly when Fox News' audience skews disproportionately old, to perpetuating this stuff.
Yeah.
What do we do? I mean, what can we do? It's the old folks aren't watching my show, so I have no access to them, right? How do
Yeah.
we manage this stuff?
It's difficult. I heard tell that last night Fox News all of a sudden started to wake up a little bit
Mm.
on this. Tucker Carlson and a few other people started to say, you really have to get serious about this. And then Trump started to take it more seriously, talked about not congregating in groups of more than 10, et cetera. So, and we've known for some time that there's a little bit of a feedback loop between Trump and Fox News. I mean, one thing that I've advocated for a long time, which is particularly hard now that we're all in lockdown. I mean, we're all sheltering in place. But the thing that I've advocated is engagement. People get information from people that they trust. And so maybe they turn on the news and, do they trust what's coming from the news or from political figures that they trust? Maybe they do. But they also trust their friends and neighbors. They also trust their family. And so I think it's really important that we have those conversations. And there's a lot of anecdotal information which shows that that works in science denial. Say that's how you get somebody to change their mind about climate change. That's how you get somebody to change their mind about anti-vax. Trusting relationship is the place to share that information. So, we can't give up. Getting the truth out there is really important.
Is there any particular set of, is there a profile of the types of folks that are more likely to open-mindedly reassess their beliefs, in the sense that you might say, well, it's intuitive that older folks are less likely to reassess their beliefs because they've
Mhm.
held their beliefs for a longer period of time. That may be completely false, right?
Yeah.
Are there some of those characteristics that let us build a profile of who is most likely to be open to changing their mind?
There's some empirical work right now going on that is, and I'm a philosopher. I'm not a social scientist, so I'm not sure I'm the best messenger for this. But there is some empirical work going on where they're trying to measure whether or not belief in, say, conspiracy theories correlates with liberal versus conservative worldview. And the trouble with this kind of research is, I mean, you can always think of exceptions. You can always, think of examples where well, what about this? What about that? In my own research, in the work that I've done on science denial and on post-truth, um, I haven't really noticed the old versus young, rich versus poor. I guess I guess I'm accepting this as a fact. We all have cognitive bias. The book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow shows that cognitive biases are built into all of us. And so I think it's dangerous to just say, well, everybody who believes in conspiracy theories skews right, or everybody who believes in, denial of coronavirus skews old, or something like that. For one, it may not be true. For another, I think it overlooks the reality, which is that we all have to be on our guard against these mind bugs, if you want to think of it that way. This ability to believe something because we want to believe it. That's really the danger. So, I can give something of an answer to this to say, look at the literature, on this, because there is, even with people working with fMRIs on this, which is really interesting work. But I don't want people just to dismiss this as somebody else's problem, because post-truth is everybody's problem.
Well, medical stuff, and in particular anti-vax, very interestingly crosses party lines. So when you look at anti-vax, you have people on the right who are anti-vax because they think that it's a government conspiracy, government trying
Right.
to control them. They're distrustful of government. People on the left say it's for-profit big pharma trying
Right.
to, pump heavy metals into us or whatever. Very different political views, but they end up in some kind of strange bedfellows sort of situation.
You're absolutely right. And the other thing to notice about anti-vax is that they tend to skew more educated as
Mm.
well, and which is a really interesting thing because, um, you think of somebody going, maybe being skeptical, maybe they're scared, and then they go to the internet and they start to do their research, and maybe they find unreliable information, then they do more research, and we in the trade, going down the rabbit hole, right? Think of it that way. But that's the same way that flat earthers are created, right? They get on YouTube, they start to look at the videos. Next thing you know, they end up there. So it's really fascinating to me that somebody can be very well educated and still believe some of these things. And I think some of what it has to do, and the literature bears me out here, is that sometimes what happens is, as somebody's better educated, they're more able to defend their views. You talk to some people who deny climate change, and they can be really up on some of the latest literature. What they don't know how to do is to reason like a scientist. They don't know how to use that evidence and that literature, um, to make the important point, not to cherry pick, not to expect, zero uncertainty before they have a belief. That's the problem that they're really missing, is not, some particular data point that they can use to shove down your throat, but how scientists reason about data.
Very, very well said. We've been speaking with Lee McIntyre, Research Fellow at the Center for Philosophy and History of Science at Boston University. The book Post-Truth is out, and you can check it out using the link in the description to the YouTube video for this discussion. Lee, always a pleasure having you on.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.